Hi guys. So I got cut off again. So I'm gonna finish this chapter 9, I guess, and then yes, chapter 9. Apologies, and then do chapter 10, and then try to delete a bunch of stuff off my phone and see if I can't figure out how to get this working a little bit better. So Mr. Z smiled. We're on page 94, last paragraph. Mr. Z smiled. I'm not saying anything, but I will tell you something that I call the Xenotopoulos toilet theory. Most people can only use one bathroom at a time. After they both laughed a little, the room was quiet for a minute or so. Then Mr. Z said, "What I was saying earlier, how you should be flattered that Maura tried to copy you. I wasn't kidding. Ever hear the old imitation? Is that the sincerest form of flattery? I think that Maura thinks that you are interesting." Greg made a face. No way. You know how teachers can tell which boys the sixth grade girls like? Greg shook his head, and he wished Mr. Z would stop talking. He wanted to put his hands over his ears and sing Yankee Doodle. These were the things he did not want to know. Mr. Z went on. Girls like the boys that they're always mad at, or showing, or turning their heads away from, or sticking their tongues out. Never fails. From down the hall, Mrs. Davenport called, "Greg, Mrs. Shaw's here. Need any help?" Greg called back, "No, I'm okay." He jumped up. He wanted to leave before Mr. Z found something else embarrassing to say. Holding the tissues and the cold pack in one hand, Greg got his things together. Mr. Z said, "Could you leave me a copy of your comic book? I'd like to take a better look at it." Greg said, "Sure, it's still there on the desk with Maura's. You can have it, free." He hurried to the doorway, but then paused and turned back. "Listen, Mr. Z, I'm really sorry about making a mess in your room, both times." And Mr. Z said, "Uh-huh, a second apology. Also accepted. That's 2 for me. 1 apology for Maura, and you'll be all caught up." Greg didn't smile. In his mind, he said, "Don't count on it." Out loud, he said, "Well, see you tomorrow." "Yes," said Mr. Z, "and if I'm still on the floor here when you come to class in 22 hours, then Mrs. Davenport should call an ambulance." As Greg headed for the front doors, it was Mr. Z who was chuckling. And we'll jump to page 10. So go ahead and chapter 10, before we start that chapter, if you would just do a quick little summary of what that chapter was about, that would be great, and where we stand, so that when you pick this up, you'll remember. Greg was quiet in the car on the way home, and so was Maura, but it wasn't awkward. Maura's mom was perfectly happy to do all the talking. "Oh, you poor dear. Let me look at... Ooh, such a bruise. And my Maura did this? But it was just an accident, and you know that, don't you? That it is an accident? Not like the time in first grade when you bumped Maura off the end of the sliding board, or that time you threw the snowball into her face. But still, you poor dear. It must hurt like crazy. Is that compress still cold? Good. Now you just lean back, because we don't want your nose to start bleeding again. Not here in the car. Mr. Shaw would give us all black eyes if that happened. I'm only kidding. But lean back. Farther. That's a good boy. Remember, Maura, when our Tommy got hit with that lacrosse ball, snapped his nose like a carrot. Ooh, figurative language. Carrot stick. And the blood, oh, you would not believe it. And when I got down to that field, it was only a 5 or 6 minute drive, but by the time he got home, Greg had heard a detailed description of every major blood-producing event endured by the Shaw family over the past 15 years. His own mom was not impressed with his condition. She gave him a quick once-over and said, "Go put that shirt in cold water in the laundry room, then take a shower. Since I'm home a little early, I think I'm going to make a lasagna for dinner." Ooh, that sounds good. How does that sound? And that was it, from his mom. By dinner time, the bruise had spread under his left eye, and his big brothers wanted details. "What do you mean? An accident?" said Ross. "Did you fall off of the climbing wall, or get hit by a baseball?" "What?" Greg shook his head. "It was somebody's hand." Edward said, "Some kid hit you?" Now take notice of the dialogue here. "No," said Greg. "It was just a bump, and she didn't mean to." "She?" said Ross. "A girl did this? That's lousy. I mean, if a guy whacks you, you can whack him back. But if it's a girl..." "Boys," their dad's tone of voice froze the chatter. "Nobody in this family whacks anybody. It was an accident, so just drop it, all right?" Ross and Edward let it go, at least until after dinner. Look at the picture, you guys. I like the squiggles around his head and the big shiner. That's what we call a black eye we used to back in the day. Ross and Edward let it go, at least until after dinner. Greg was sitting at his desk, doing a tally of the day's sales, when both his brothers came bursting into his room. They each had painted on black eyes, and Ross, panting like he'd been running, running, said, hide us, me and Edward, we were just outside just now, and this whole gang of tiny girls came up and started pounding us. It was terrible. They're everywhere. Then they both fell to the floor, howling with laughter. Can you make a connection to that? A time when a sibling was teasing you, or maybe you were teasing a sibling? Greg wanted to laugh too, but he didn't dare. Ross was a high school sophomore and Edward was a freshman. The slightest encouragement of their madness could prove fatal. As coldly as possible, Greg said, very funny, and went back to his numbers. He always did the accounting before he started his homework. About 20 minutes later, Greg was almost done with his social studies reading when his mom called up the stairs. Greg, telephone. He trotted out and grabbed the portable phone off the table in the hall. It was the last person he wanted to hear from. Greg, it's me, Maura. Now, the portable table, back in the day when I was a kid, we didn't have cell phones, right? We had phones with the cords on them. And then we got phones that were portable without the cord, and they were probably like that big, not like our little tiny little cell phones. Yeah, they were huge with a huge antenna that you have to pull up. Ask your parents, they know. There was an assignment in math and you weren't there, so I thought you'd want to know. Greg said, yeah, sure. I was going to call and get it from Ted. And he thought, what does she think? I'm stupid that I'd miss a math assignment. But in a fairly pleasant tone of voice, he said, so what's the assignment? You have a pencil? Uh-huh. Greg had already hurried back to his room for fear that his brothers might guess he was talking to a girl. On page 17, it's exercise B, said Maura. All the even-numbered pages, problems, and I could help if you don't understand it or something, because you weren't there. Nope, that's okay, said Greg. I can do it. This stuff is still review, so this is good. Yeah, this is good. Morris said, Mr. Z told everybody to pay attention to the decimal points, and he said he might give us a quiz, which means he probably will. Good, said Greg. That's good to know. Yeah, good. This is good. Already, this was the longest conversation Greg had ever had with a female who was not his relative, or at least 30 years old, or both. Plus, Greg couldn't help remembering what Mr. Z had said, that he thought Maura found him interesting. Even with a topic as safe as a math assignment, Greg felt the strain. He was ready to sign off. Then Maura said, I read your comic book again. It makes my unicorn story look just awful. I know you said mine isn't a comic book, but I don't really get what that means. Probably because I haven't looked at comic books much. Tommy has some, but I never got into reading them, so I don't really know what makes them so different. Greg knew what the difference was. It was simple, because a good comic book is almost like a movie. The words of a comic book are like the script. Every panel is a little scene that moves the story ahead, and the time can be speeded up or slowed down, just like a movie. And because he understood comics, Greg almost started to explain. Then he remembered. This was Maura on the phone. Maura the copycat. Maura the idea thief. Maura the enemy. So Greg said, yeah, well, listen, I've got to finish my social studies reading. And since he didn't want to be completely rude, Greg said, thanks for the math assignment. You're welcome, Maura said. Well, see you around. Not if I see you first, Greg thought. But he said, yep, bye. And he pushed the phone's off button. Sitting there at his desk in his room, Greg knew the real reason Maura had called him. It wasn't to try to help him out with his math grade. She had called to fish around for new ideas. She was trying to beat him at his own game. She was trying to get ahead, trying to figure out how to make her dumb little books so she could make her dumb little books better so she could make some cash. And Greg thought, nice try, weasel brain. If you think I'm going to help you make money, think again. You're on your own. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 10. I'm going to put my little sticky note in here and see what I was going to have you guys do here. I think if you can write a summary of that chapter, that was just a little short one, that would be great. And then I want you to write draw a line under your summary, just a little summary. That one can be like a little 3-sentence summary. And then I want you to just kind of get some ideas, maybe just start writing a paragraph, an opening paragraph of a narrative in which a character or third-person character narrator describes the setting. Okay, so the setting is where the story takes place. Okay, so you're going to make up a setting. So you might want to do your house since you're spending a lot of time at your house. Okay, it's going to be a narrative, so it'll be made up. And then I want you to have a character narrator, sorry, in third person, describe it. So it's not going to be I am in my house. I see a couch and the couch is red, and by my couch is a coffee table. You're going to have the narrator telling what's going on in the story. You want to use concrete words and phrases, sense words. Remember the senses: touch, taste, smell, hear. Okay, feel. So you want to make it clear so the reader can really understand. The people went into the room and saw something. They heard a noise. So it's third person. It's not I. The people. The people are living in the house. The house is on a hill. It is large with 5 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, and a swimming pool in the basement. It is dark in the basement and scary for the people who live there. So just a paragraph setting a scene. When it's third person, and we're going to expand on that tomorrow. So make it something you're interested in, you want to write about. So you can make it spooky, you can make it funny. It can be wherever you want it to be. It could be an amusement park, it could be at a park, it could be at the beach, could be at an airport. Not too far-fetched, boys. No aliens, zombies, not like that. So realistic, okay? And so kind of get some ideas. I hope that's clear. It's hard explaining it on here. I'm not very good at this, but just about a paragraph again, writing an opening paragraph of a narrative in which a character or third person narrator describes the setting. Okay, so the third person narrator is describing the setting. And I'll get back to you when you're ready. Okay, love ya. Bye.